He's the current CEO of IQ Business, a largest independent management consulting firm in South Africa. You're one of the few that is still surviving, eh? Yeah, so let's do IQ. Yeah. They've been taking a lot of pain, most of the consulting firm in South Africa. And he's been there as a CEO since 2010. He's done a great job. To tell me now it's about 700 people already. Adam joined IQ Business in September 2009 and was appointed CEO in November 2010. He comes from Super Group. How many of you remember we had a CEO of Super Group here? Peter, Dimension Data Group Executive, Mentions, MD, Accenture, Associate Partner, British guest. So you've been in my industry in your youth as an analyst, eh? Wow, that's great. He's also a very learned man. He's got diploma in marketing and MBA from a very prestigious place called IMD in Lausanne. In my organization, when you are hypo and we are going somewhere, we take to Lausanne. And also done a BSc in computer sciences and management. Adam is a member of Young Presidents Organization, and I'm sure most of you who are here have been in ULP. You will run and become presidents of organizations, CEOs, and you're going to join this organization. A fellowship of the Institute of Directors, a fellow, and the president of the IMD Alumni Club of South Africa. Without any waste of time, let's give over to Adam. Adam. Thank you.
Maurice, thank you very, very much for that warm welcome. And to the ULP leadership team, your hospitality this evening has really been wonderful. So it's wonderful to join you here this evening. One thing I'll point out is that although I'm a member of the Young Presidents Organization, I'm a part of the older piece of the Young Presidents Organization. So don't automatically think, oh my goodness, how young can you be you can be as young as you like to join the Young President, but there is a limit that's there. I want to start by asking you a question. I've been on this earth for about 26 and I'd say 26.6 million minutes. How old do you think that makes me at this point? Because I've been given 40 minutes to talk about my life of 26.6 million minutes, which means that for every minute that I have, I've got to cover 600,000 or so minutes per minute. So I will try to go quite quickly through that. But any guesses in terms of number of years at the back there? Yes. 49. Oh, thank you. I love you to bits. That's really good. But I'm actually 52. But 49 will do. We'll stop there. I quite like the 49. I've just gone backwards by 3 years, which is great. So what I thought I would do this evening is give you an insight into my leadership style, my leadership approach. And clearly at this point, I'm the CEO of a 700-person strong organization, but I've been involved in larger organizations. It's really fun to be in a privately owned business rather than a listed company, I would say, at this point. And I wanted to give you a bit of context. By now, you've probably fathomed that my accent is not entirely local, and Maurice did blow my cover earlier on, that originally I was from England. But I do want to point out, under a statement of full disclosure, that on Saturday there was only one team that I was supporting, and that gentleman over there is wearing the same colour top that I was wearing, because I have a principle if I have for 22 years lived in South Africa and paid taxes in South Africa for 22 years, I have earned the right to be able to support, and I better support the local team. So what I thought I would do is I would tell you about my entire life, and I want to do that in a way that obviously goes quite quickly at the beginning, but I think it's relevant to give you the context, to tell you where I started in life and how those minutes have whizzed by over time. And in thinking about what I wanted to share with you, I thought long and hard about whether I show you this very special artifact that I've brought with me here. And I don't, in all honesty, share this with very many people. I've shared it with my family. I've shared it with one or two others that are close to me. I feel slightly exposed in sharing this with you. It almost feels like having a doctor's examination in public, if you can imagine that. When you walk into the doctor and the doctor says, please take off your clothes and sit in your underwear on the side, and I will come with the stethoscope and check you right now. So this feels like I'm in a very personal situation that normally is just me and the doctor. Well, there isn't. There's a few close friends. Well, hopefully by the end of this, we'll consider you'll be closer to me because you'll know something about me. I won't know so much about you, I don't think. So the artifact that I wanted to share with you is a wonderful work of art. Don't you think it's a wonderful work of art? The Seven of Hearts. It looks like something that my kids might have produced. It's actually something that I created in a rush. I did this, in fact, when I was 49, and I went away for about 5 days, with a group of 16 CEOs. And we went away on a mutual exploration called Purpose Quest. And at the age of 49, I decided that I needed to understand why I am here as a human being. I had never really explored the why question. And that was brought on by the process that I had gone through at my company and led the company through defining our why or our purpose as an organization. And the 16 CEOs that I went away with were all members of the Young Presidents organization. And I knew probably 5 of them, and the rest of them were complete strangers. And we went through a process over the 5 days of engaging very directly with each other, as well as spending a lot of time in individual sessions, alone, thinking and engaging. And this is the product of 5 days of thinking. It's very meaningful to me. So let me share it with you. And the product is, as you can see, I drew it as the Seven of Hearts. And the reason that I did that is when I started to think about my life at the age of 49, I realized that I had gone through 7 cycles of 7 years, and that I was at the end of the 7th cycle at 49. And the reason why I started to think about my purpose and my why is that I was beginning to think about, well, what's next? Where am I going to? And it was important to me to reflect back and think back. And when I thought about my life in 7-year cycles, it became apparent to me, just like if you look at a card, the 7 of Hearts, there are 7 hearts where the heart is in the right position. And at the bottom of the 7 of Hearts, there are 2 hearts that are upside down. That's just the nature of a 7 of Hearts. And it was really meaningful to me. So let me explain what each of these means. The first heart is the first 7 years from being born to turning 7 years old. And if we believe that we do go through these 7-year cycles, and you'll get the gist of this as I go through, one's body, one's mind, one's spiritual awareness changes and adapts every 7 years. So you can think as we go through this about where you are in the 7-year cycles. Those first 7 years are what I would frame and refer to as the early childhood development stage. They're vitally important. That's when we learn as human beings. That's when we learn to walk, learn to speak, learn to eat with a knife and fork, learn to study or to love, and so many things happen in those first 7 years. I had a very happy start to my life. I'm one of 4 children. I have an older brother who's 2 years older than me, and I have a younger brother, and the youngest in my family is my sister. And she happens to be 7 years younger than me. So as I was 7, then my sister Hannah was born. Then let's move to the second of the 7-year cycles between the ages of 7 and 14. And these are the years that character is formed. They're very, very important. Character of your, it's when you start to take an identity. It's when you start to be a little bit more outspoken with your parents, perhaps. It's when your body begins to develop a little bit, but you're still very much a child that's there. My second period of 7 years was not the most happiest. It's actually here at the bottom of the 7 of Hearts. It's the first heart that was spun upside down. And the reason for that is that my father, at age 32, passed away. Very, very young, very, very early, with 4 children, and my mother left with those 4 children to bring up the kids. So not a happy time for us as siblings, and certainly had a major impact on my character, on the years that I was forming and developing. We then moved to the third of the 7 of Hearts, and I'm sorry to tell you that it's another heart that was spun upside down. At the age of 17, as I was studying for what my son, who's 18 now, he's doing his matric at the moment, I was studying for my matric or my A-levels in the UK, and my mother passed away at age 44. It was really at that stage with I was 17, my sister was only 10 years old, and my older brother's 2 years older than me. So to be orphaned and to be left alone was a really pivotal point in my life. That third period is what is referred to often as that maturity phase. Between 14 and 21, so much happens from a maturing perspective. One begins to grow up, to become an adult, to aspire to step out and stand out, to think about adulthood, turning 18, turning 21, those really pivotal, significant years in our lives. And again, I felt really set back at that point. If I'm really honest with you, and I pause for a moment, as I was undertaking my studies, to leave high school, I was thinking about going to university. And quite honestly, the disruption of having lost both of my parents really affected my studies. And if anything, it was an excuse that I could use, and I used it as an excuse. And I got to the stage of completing my studies, and I wanted to go to university, and I hadn't got the grades that I needed. And a teacher at my school, who had become very close to me through the loss of my mother, had encouraged me to engage with the company that you saw at the bottom there, British Gas. Because British Gas offered internships. British Gas was, in the UK, is what I would say is the equivalent of ESCOM in South Africa. So they were offering internships, and they were saying, please come and be evaluated for an internship. And I was very, very lucky. I was very lucky because they offered me an internship, and they offered me sponsorship to pay for my university. I couldn't have afforded to go to university. In fact, I was the first member of my family to go to university, and we have quite a big family. So I was very lucky. And what that meant was the British Gas said to me, before you go to university, come to the business and come and work for a year before you go off to university. And because I hadn't got my grades, I was very lucky that my mentor at British Gas said to me, leave it with me, I will speak to the university. And he did, and he negotiated very hard. He told them that they could see potential and that they were taking me, and they explained my story, and they got me into university. That was one lucky break that I got at the start of my career. And it's worth just reflecting for a moment on, as I ended that third cycle of 7 years, and I entered the fourth cycle as a university graduate at age 21. And I had to go back to British Gas to complete a further year of what had become a 5-year internship. And I went back to meet my mentor at the end of that year, expecting to get a great performance review and super feedback. And he said to me, Adam, you have to leave British Gas. And I sat there, I was absolutely dumbfounded. And I said, what have I done? Have I done something wrong? Is there something wrong with the organization? And he said, there's nothing wrong, but it's now time, after 5 years, for you to go and spread your wings. You need to go somewhere else. And that was an amazing moment in my career, because I actually graduated from university with a first-class honours degree after 3 years. And one of the things that happened to me during university was that I learned how to learn, which was, it might sound a little bit bizarre, but all the way through my school years, I'd kind of coasted through, I'd done enough to do what I thought I needed to do, and it was only when I got to university that I discovered that I really could achieve great things. And that was only by learning how to learn and applying my mind to it. So the fourth cycle between the ages of, obviously, from 21 to 28, and that's the period that we'll call the refinement period. That's the period in one's young adult life where all those first 3 building blocks start to build a little bit more momentum. And I started to earn a decent salary, and I started to travel internationally, and I started to get trained because I joined at that stage Anderson Consulting, which is now called Accenture. And off I went to Chicago for the first time to be trained at the training facility there. And I really felt impassioned by the business that I was working in and the opportunities that I had and that were afforded to me. And between those ages, from 21 up to 28, that refinement really started to happen. And indeed, at the age of 28, I resigned from Accenture, and I decided to go off to study my MBA. And one of the partners who was my mentor at Anderson Consulting, or Accenture today, had said to me that he felt that I should go and study and get my master's. And I looked at all the different business schools. I looked at going to the US, going into parts of Europe and the UK and elsewhere. And I chose the school in Switzerland because it was made up of 82 participants in the program that were from 38 different nationalities around the world. What an amazing mix in a room full of people like this, where there are 38 nations that are represented, the dynamics, the conversations, the differences, the different races, the different backgrounds, the different experiences. And I went to Switzerland and studied through the program, and one of those classmates was from South Africa. And we became very close classmates, and we decided that we would embark on a joint project. One of the things that we had to do, and this was bearing in mind in 1996, which even when I say that surprises me and frightens me, that's a long time ago. We decided that we would come to South Africa. Myself, the South African, an Indian partner from the class, and an Italian. And we came here to launch a social enterprise, because part of the program in 1996, the master's program, was to understand that the role of business in supporting society was critical. So we arrived in 1996, and 2 years after the first democratic elections in South Africa, what an exciting time it was to be part, to see, to understand Madiba's presidency, and to see what was happening here. And I decided that I had to come back at the end of the MBA. I wanted to be part of the transformation that was happening here. I wanted to be part of the energy and the drive. And when I went back to Switzerland, I went back with an offer to come back here. One from Dimension Data, the company that I joined several years later. They said, come and work for us in South Africa. One from a company called McKinsey, which I'm very glad today that I don't have that on my CV. And one from Accenture or Anderson Consulting, who said, why don't you come join us in London, and we'll send you to South Africa for 2 or 3 years, and you can come and work for us in Johannesburg and learn about the environment and the situation and work here. And so that was the option that I took. And I came to South Africa to engage in work here for maybe 2, maybe 3 years. And towards the end of that time, I really began to love what we had experienced here. I'd married my wife at that point, so things were getting very exciting, because we're in the next cycle, the 5th cycle, between being 28 and 35, which is really the creative cycle, the creative 7 years. And I say that for a number of reasons, because lots of scientists have said that's when we are at our most creative, between 28 and 35. And indeed, my wife and I got married, and we had our first child. That's pretty creative at that point. Very, very important. And in fact, we then had our second child, my daughter, and a really wonderful experience and period for us. One of the experiences I had, though, when I first came to South Africa, was I went out to a client at ABSA, and I think we all know ABSA, and this was in 1997, and one of the executives at ABSA said, it's wonderful that you're here. I want you to come to my home and have a braai. And I said, well, that's amazing, but what's that? What's a braai? Braais in the UK are called barbecues. But anyway, he invited me to his home in Pretoria and said, I want you to come and meet my family and have a braai. And I went there to his home, and while we were sitting at the table after we cooked the food and we were sitting down, the executive said to me, so Adam, what gun do you have in South Africa? And I said, I put my knife and fork down and said, excuse me, gun? He said, yes, what gun? I'm just interested to know, you've been here now for a year. You've obviously got a gun. And I said, I don't. Why would I need a gun? I said, I don't have a gun. And he put his knife and fork down and he said, my goodness, you've come all the way here from Johannesburg to Pretoria. You drove here and you don't have a gun. And I said, I don't. And he said, come with me. And he marched me off back into the back of his house, and he unlocked this great big door and flung it open, and there was the bat cave. I looked inside, And there was the hunting rifle, the shotgun, and then a wall of guns. And he said to me, choose one. Choose one. You're not leaving my home without a gun. It's unsafe. I feel guilty that I've brought you here and you don't have a gun. And I said to him, if I took one, I wouldn't know what to do with it. So please, it's very kind of you, but if it's all the same, I won't take a gun. And I'll assure you, I still don't have a gun. If I felt that I needed a gun to live here, then I wouldn't live here. But those kinds of bizarre stories or experiences that then led through my life to a change that I made. And the change that I made was that I accepted the job that I'd been offered by Dimension Data. And I joined Dimension Data in the year of 1999. And I know that's also still a long time ago. And Dimension Data was a listed company in South Africa on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And I was the first non-South African member of the executive team. And my colleagues at Dimension Data used to talk about me as a pommie, or as, I won't say all of the derogatory remarks that they used to refer to, but they used to engage with me quite differently because I wasn't schooled or educated in South Africa, and I was learning lots of new things. I learned lots of swear words in Afrikaans, and usually those were pointed at me in some shape or form. I knew when those were being used inappropriately, I must say. But I joined Dimension Data in a period of massive growth. Dimension Data had gone from the period of 1993 to 2000, from turning over $200 million in 1993 to turning over $2 billion in the year 2000. Massive growth. And we decided that we would move the primary listing of Dimension Data from Johannesburg to London, which was a major step. And at the time, the internet bubble, the millennium crossover, all of the IT-related challenges and changes were happening very, very rapidly. And when we moved the listing to London, we entered what's called the FTSE 100, which is the top 100 of listed companies that are there. And we entered at level 55 on the FTSE 100. And we knocked off the bottom because there can only be 100. So who became number 101 was Rolls-Royce. That was a major moment. I remember the night at Data in the bar when we celebrated the fact that we had a bigger market capitalization than British Airways. And they owned lots of planes and things, and we were just a technology services organization, and Rolls-Royce were off the FTSE 100. Well, I can tell you it was very short-lived, because within a year, the internet bubble had got to a point where it expanded massively, and Dimension Data's share price rose all the way to £10 on the London Stock Exchange. And when the bubble burst, it dropped from £10 to 11 pence. 11 pence. That's a 99% shareholder value destruction. In today's terms, that's more than Steinhoff, to put it into context. As a result of that, we wrote off of the balance sheet, $4.5 billion. That's just about as much as Cecil has spent over on the Lake Charles project, just to put that into context. It's a big number. When you multiply that by 15, it becomes a lot in rands. And I remember the first year that the 702 Walk the Talk, if anybody has done that, I decided to go and do the Walk the Talk. And I took my little dog with me to do it, and I didn't really think about it, but I wore a T-shirt that I'd worn many times, and on the back of the T-shirt, it had the big green triangle of Dimension Data. And as I was walking along in the crowd, I could hear people saying things, shouting and things. And I knew some of the South Afrikaans expletives that were being used. And I realized it was me that they were talking about because I had dimension data. And then somebody spat at me on the back of the legs, and they cursed, and they said how much money they had lost because of the crooks at Dimension Data that had destroyed so much value. And it really was a pivotal moment in life. And very quickly, Dimension Data moved into a diabolical situation in terms of the pressures that we faced. We were operating in countries around the world, 48 countries around the world, and our listing had crashed. We were in a diabolical situation. I was 32 years old when that happened. And one of the most interesting moments was seeing the group executive for sales and the group executive for marketing who told me they were resigning, they were leaving. And at the age of 32, one has a little bit of gusto. What would you say? Chutzpah, or a little bit of gusto. And I decided to go and have a meeting with Jeremy Ord, who was the chairman and chief executive at Dimension Data. And I said to him, Jeremy, I'm here to offer myself to take over the roles of group executive of sales and marketing. I know that the two executives are leaving, and I would like to offer myself to take over the job. Well, what do you think he said to me at that point? It wasn't very flattering, I can tell you. It started with an F and finished with an O. And he told me to get the hell out of his office. So I did. I got up and I walked out, and there was the sales and marketing director. They knew that I was going in there, and they said to me, how did that go? I said, not exactly as I planned. And then 2 weeks later, I was surprised that I got a call from Jeremy's PA, who said, please, Jeremy wants to see you right away. So I walked into his office, and he was sitting in exactly the same position that I'd left him in behind his desk. And he didn't look very comfortable. And he raised his head up from his desk, and he looked at me, and he said, Adam, you've got the job. Now, F.O. out of my office right now. And I left, and I had the job at 32 years old as group executive of sales and marketing of a $2.5 billion turnover company with operations in 48 countries around the world. And I realized it took me about a month to realize why I got the job. And there's a very good reason. Nobody else wanted the job. It was a diabolical time. I realized that the average tenure of a sales and marketing director in the technology industry at that point in time was a maximum of 6 months, because it was really tough in the market. And cutting a long story short, I held the job for 6 years. And over those 6 years, we doubled the revenue line from $2 billion to $4 billion in a period that was really, really tough. But in order to do that, I was spending up to 200 days a year flying to 48 countries around the world to be with the teams, to engage with our partners. And bearing in mind, my kids were very young in their own early childhood development phase that my wife had to supplement. If I'm not there, then that was a pretty tough period. And what I realized after 6 years, and let me tell you, I loved my job. The experience of having a round-the-world ticket that I literally would take off from Johannesburg, fly to London, fly to San Francisco, fly across to Singapore, visit Hong Kong on the way, go through a whole series of cities and then back. And sometimes I would be away for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And indeed, at one stage, I moved to the UK. My family were here, and I used to spend 3 months of the year in the UK operating from there, flying, because it was quicker and easier to do that. My family would then come and see me and fly up to see me there. And I became a tax exile, because if you spend 182 days out of your country during a year, for 3 months of which have to be where you don't come back, you pay no taxes. That's pretty good, isn't it? I mean, I thought that was fantastic. It was really a super thing. My family didn't think very much of that. And indeed, I came home from a 3-week trip. I walked through the gate to my home. As I walked through, my dogs came running towards me, and they attacked me around my legs. And I thought, well, geez. And I walked into the house, and there was my wife and my 2 young kids. And my wife attacked me in the house, not with a knife or anything, but she laid into me to say, Adam, when you're away, we have a routine. When you come back, you're disrupting that. So either be part of our routine or have your own routine. And believe me, as I was traveling through airports around the world, I used to meet lots of marketing and sales directors from other companies, and every single one of them that I met was divorced. And I decided I can't do that any longer. So I left Dimension Data, and I was in a period between the ages of 35 to 42, which is a pivotal period. That's known as the restlessness period. It's quite interesting because I only thought about it afterwards. I was very restless in that time. And I started to think about what I wanted to do next. And I wanted to be a CEO. I wanted to test myself beyond the limit of my abilities as a sales and marketing director. And I joined Supergroup, the industrial conglomerate. And I joined Supergroup in 2008, when, having completed the turnaround at Dimension Data, and I saw Supergroup, that was also a listed company, with their price coming off, not as much as Dimension Data, but I thought, this looks like a turnaround situation. And I've learned how to do a turnaround. Let me go and do another one. And I joined as the Chief Operating Officer, with a view that I would then become the Chief Executive of Supergroup. And again, I was there for about a month, and I realized very quickly that the turnaround was much deeper than a turnaround. It was a rescue, because Supergroup turned into a diabolical situation. We had to restate our financial accounts for 2 years prior. And when that happens, all of a sudden, all sorts of financial implications, covenants, and other issues begin to come into focus. And you know, at the moment that we're on a negative watch with Moody's as a country. Well, if you have a bond inside a company, then that bond is rated by one of the 3 international rating agencies. And I'll never forget the day. We had a bond of 600 million rand inside our company. And on that day, having restated our financial results for 2 years prior, Fitch called us up and said, we're re-rating your bond to junk. And within 24 hours, as well as having a bond for 600 million, we had short-term funding for our overdrafts of about 350 million. We had 14 banks arrive in our reception and tell us that the terms on our overdraft have just changed. They were 1-year terms. They were renewable terms over 1 year. And they said, those terms have now become 24 hours. You must repay 350 million rand within 24 hours. And when you have 14 banks standing in your reception, I guess the first question you can ask is, well, who would like to go first? Form a queue. And it's amazing to see 14 bankers saying, well, I'm the biggest bank, or I'm the reddest bank, or the bluest bank, or the greenest bank. But we put them all into a boardroom, and we held them there until we managed to stabilize the situation. And one of the most dramatic situations I had spent in Angola, where Supergroup had a $36 million theft that had taken place in Angola. And I went there to go and find the theft, how it had taken place. And I found all the evidence, all the information. And then the thieves found me. And they came to visit me at a cafe in Luanda. And I was sitting at the table, and the chief thief, who happened to be the son of one of the country's leaders, sat down with me and said, "Adam, you're my guest in Angola. Nothing can ever happen to you in Luanda. Nobody would dare." And as I looked around, the people that he was with were showing me that they had weapons, they had things, and they then closed their jackets for a moment. "Nothing," he said, "could ever happen to you here. But you live in a very dangerous city in Johannesburg, and I cannot protect you there. So when you go home, be very, very careful," he said. So it's amazing to think that for 10,000 Rand in Johannesburg, you really can take somebody out. And I decided that I was doing something very foolish or foolhardy, where I was almost treating the money like my own and the situation like my own, and it was not. And it was at that point that I decided that I should leave Supergroup. And I don't know when Peter was here if he told you how deep that challenge became, because one of our colleagues, about a month later, was murdered, was shot and killed about 1 kilometre from my home. And it really brought home to me that in business, if you construct shady deals, if you cross the line, then you can expect that there will be very, very serious consequences. And then I moved at the age of 42 into the 7th 7, between 42 and 49. And that's the period that I would call the retrospect period, because it's then that I really brought things together. I joined IQ Business. As Maurice said earlier on, I joined 1 year and was made chief executive the following year. I got what I wanted in terms of the leadership opportunity. And for 10 years, between 42 and 52, I've been part of the most amazing journey in taking a business. When I joined, it had 275 people, to the present day with 700 people, working all over Africa, the UK, Hong Kong, and elsewhere. Very, very exciting journey and cycle to experience from to the year, I guess, 49 in the retrospect period. What I've found now in the last 3 years that I've reversed from 52 to 49 is that this period, this 8th 7 that I'm now in, is what I would refer to as the spiritual period. Because having formed an understanding of my purpose, I've really now understood what I am here for and the role that I play in society, in the economy, in my business, in my family, and in so many different aspects. And I'm really enjoying this 8th 7-year cycle that I'm in. And I'm going to finish at that point, but I guess I have to tell you what I think the next few cycles are. I haven't got there yet, but at age 56, I'm expecting in the 9th cycle to move into what we can refer to as the tranquility cycle, from 56 to 63. Tranquility, being really comfortable in oneself, hopefully feeling that there's something so much more that I can do with my life, but being fairly tranquil. Then the time period between 63 to 70, I'm really, really looking forward to, because that's the period, I think, of understanding. That's the period of reflection back and thinking, well, there aren't that many cycles of 7 left. It starts to get a little bit pressing. I would hope after 7 cycles, there could be another 7 cycles to get to 98, wouldn't you? You could be at the halfway stage, but that would be pushing it, I think. So that period of understanding happens, and then from 70 to 77, it's what I would refer to as the unconditional period. It's the unconditional giving or love or care that one can provide. And then lastly, and I've stopped at between 77 to 84, which I'll call the new self period, because something new might happen at that point. That's my story. That's my framework. That's my thoughts. I hope that gives you a little bit more color.